Shalom Chaverim, I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching the Nun Institute of Biblical Research, and I just have really stumbled across this earlier today. And what's interesting is after, I kind of stumbled across this revelation here in the book that I've been sharing with some of you guys on Israeli News Live called The Holocaust Victims Accused, written by a rabbi that survived the Holocaust. Very interesting book. I also found out that there is a little excerpt written in here that kind of confirms indirectly what I'm about to share with you now. And I say indirectly because the revelation that the Lord gave me is not written in this book, but there is an interesting thing about the, so to speak, the taskmasters that were over the Jewish people during the times of the Egyptians. And it has been believed by many scholars that the taskmasters that were over the Jewish people in those days there were indeed actually other Jews. And I can certainly believe it because to me, nothing has ever changed during time. And this is something that I really feel very passionate about in exposing the crimes that have been done against the Jewish people, especially during the Holocaust. And it's just been a real passion of mine to want to bring these things out. And of course, as you guys have seen, it's just really been something that God has dealt with me when it comes to what has happened in the state of Israel, how we have been betrayed by our own people, by prime ministers in the past. I discovered recently that Prime Minister Ben-Gurion was also, him and Moshe Sharit had sold out nearly 800,000 Jews during the Holocaust in order for their own safe passage that was facilitated by the Catholic Church to create the state of Israel. And in fact, as I have, even in reading this book right here, I'll share with you the cover of this. This book is not in print, guys. It is not in print. We paid nearly $100 just to get this one. We caught this, a used one here. It's from years ago. It's actually written by Rabbi Moshe Schoenfeld. And this is a two-part book, so we don't have the second part as of yet there. But let's see, it's copyrighted in 1977. This was also during the Eichmann trials when this book was first being written. But I'm going to share some excerpts with you here this evening because of what I said, like I said, the revelation that the Lord placed upon my heart that I wanted to share with you. Now, I'm actually in the book of Exodus. I'm in chapter 2, I believe it is, if I have not forgot where I'm at. And I'm going to read to you just 2 verses here that I wanted to share with you. Actually, I was going to go a whole different direction. I was going to take you to Jeremiah chapter 25, which, by the way, Jeremiah 25, clearly in the latter part from about verse 15 on down. You might want to read this afterwards or part of your Bible study this weekend because I am going to come back to this next week. I hope if the Lord help me not to forget about that. Because this is God's judgment coming upon the world and in a very near future. Anyway, though, we read right here, it says, and this is speaking about Moses, and Moses, of course, he is coming out. I'll back up just a little bit to here to say verse 11. And it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown up that he went out to his brethren and looked on their burdens. And he saw an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew, one of his brethren. Now, by the way, we already know that Moses is about 40 years old when this happens. All right, so it wasn't like when he was 16 or 18. But he says he looked this way. And he looked that way, and when he saw that there was no man, he smote the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. All right. Then he went on the second day, and behold, 2 men of the Hebrews were striving together. And he said to him that had did the wrong, wherefore smitest thou thy fellow? And he said, who made thee a ruler and a judge over us? Thinkest thou to kill me as thou didst kill the Egyptian? And Moses feared and said, surely the thing is known. Now, I want to just stop here for a moment and share with you some thoughts that I have here because I've seen this in a totally different light when I read this afternoon. And I'm always in my heart just asking God, is there something that you would reveal to my heart that I can share with the people? And on this particular occasion, this part here caught me right here. Who made thee a ruler? Okay, Veyomer mi shemcha, לאיש שר ושפט עלינו. See, who made you, to this man, a prince and a judge? Right? Who made you, who? All right? Shemcha. Who is your name, so to speak, to this man to be a prince and a judge over us? All right? And as I read that, I'm thinking about this, and I realize, and I can't say this with a complete certainty, but it almost as if the Jewish guy that's beating the other Jewish guy, he may not even be saying this in the light of, you're the prince of Egypt, but you have no right telling me what to do because I'm a Jew. In other words, since when do you start caring about the Jews? That's normally the way we've taken this. All right? But in my opinion, I'm wondering, this just kind of the way God began to deal with my heart, that this taskmaster, because that's really what he was, in my opinion, I believe he was one of the taskmasters there, he is saying to Moses, since when are you the ruler over us? Because there, no doubt there were many princes in Egypt. It wasn't just Moses was the only prince of Egypt, but there may have been many princes because these pharaohs, they had multiple wives and they had many kids, many princes that were in Egypt there. And maybe he was used to having a certain prince over them, over his group there that would tell them what to do. And that may have been just the thing there, who made you a ruler and judge over us? Because he knew that this guy had already killed the Egyptian. He knew Moses had killed him. Whether or not he knew that Moses was a Hebrew as well, the scripture doesn't say that he knew that he was, right? But also, you have to back up and look too with what was going on. And when he went out the second day, and behold, 2 men of the Hebrews were striving together, and he said to him that did the wrong, wherefore smitest thou thy fellow? And it literally in Hebrew is almost as if it's like he was giving him a beating. Not so much that he's beating him up with his fist, but like he's taking it could be as if he were using a whip, beating him nearly to death. So that's when he's asking the question, who makes you a prince over us and a judge? Right? Now, and granted, I don't want to take away from the typical theological view of this, that indeed maybe the man did believe that, he knew that Moses was a Jew, and he is saying, in other words, you killed the Egyptian, why, I'm not trying to take away from this aspect, but looking at this in the light of another possibility, as we see, out of Egypt I call my son, applied to the children of Israel coming out of Egypt, but it also applies to Yeshua, as the apostles mentioned, that it was a fulfillment of when he came back out of Egypt after his father or after Joseph taken him and Mary to Egypt to flee the edicts of the governor at that time when he was killing all the Jewish children. So, as I was looking at this though, the other thing that got my attention about this is the fact that, the first day Moses goes out, he sees the Egyptians smiting his brethren. And he takes this guy and kills him and buries him in the sand. The second day, see, that's what's interesting, all right? And then it says here, B'yotze b'yom hashnei, all right? And he went out on the second day, this is Moses, and he sees this man, Anashim Ivrim. He sees the 2 men of the Hebrews, and they're going through this altercation, all right? Now, it's to me almost like it is speaking of Moses in his first coming and the second coming. Because as I've stated many times before, I believe that the 2 witnesses represent Moses and Elijah. And we know that Elijah was here more than once. He was here when he was actually here in his physical body. We know that Yeshua likens him to be John the Baptist when he was actually here. When he said, they asked him the question, doesn't the scripture say that Elijah is supposed to first come and restore all things? And now Jesus at that point puts Elijah coming in the future. He said, truly Elijah shall come and shall restore all things. That's the future tense. But then he goes on and he puts it in a past tense. But I say unto you, he's come already. They did to him what was listed. All right? So we can see 3 comings of Elijah right there. Now don't confuse that with Elisha, because with Elisha it was only the spirit of Elijah rested upon him. But in the case of John the Baptist, it's like a different issue. Maybe it's still the spirit of him resting. That would be my thought still yet, but it's just an interesting thing to think about. All right? But in this case here, it almost seems that God is showing us Moses' ministry the first time and the second time. All right? The first time, why do I say the first time and the second time? Well, in the case of the Egyptian, he buries him in the sand. When Moses did come and Moses delivered the children of Israel from Egypt, he pretty much buried the Egyptians in the sand. He went there with a stick in his hand to deliver the children of Israel, and between all the deaths and plagues that hit Egypt, and if that wasn't enough, when the army tried to follow him, they all were drowned in the depths of the sea, and then their bodies were seen all along the sands, laying there on the seashore afterwards, after they all drowned and died. Again, they were what? Buried in the sand, so to speak, like in an analogy. Moses wiped out the entire Egyptian army, single-handedly, but with the grace of God with him. Now, here's what I'm getting at, though. Because you have to understand, when we look at, for example, if you go to Exodus chapter 3, and I'll back up and show you this here. And Exodus chapter 15, right? The very first verse, Az yeshir Moshe uvanei Yisrael et hashirah hazot leYehovah veyomer lemor hashirah leYehovah ki ga'ago sus verekavo ramah beyom. All right. So it says, and then sang this Moses this song to the children or the sons of Israel. This song that he says, he goes on to say here, V'yomer lemor, saying to him, I will sing to Yehovah. See, notice again, Ashirah, I will sing to Yehovah, right? For he is mighty and exalted. Go'ah. And the sus, the horse, Verekavo, and his rider, which is a single rider, Ramah Beyom, hath he thrown into the sea. Now, even Jewish scholars believe that this has never been fulfilled. Rashi, one of the Torah commentators that most Jews really adhere to, he believes that Moses has to return based on this verse. We have in Revelation chapter 11 the 2 witnesses that come, and those 2 witnesses clearly have the gifts of both Elijah and Moses. Moses turns the water to blood. Speaking of turning the water to blood, Moses never fulfilled the passage when God says, if they do not hear the voice of these 2 signs, or if they don't hear you, nor the voice of the first sign, nor the latter sign, then you're to take the water and to pour it on the earth, and it'll turn to blood. Moses never poured water onto the earth. It never turned to blood. That's a representation of the judgment of God that comes in this latter day. In fact, maybe I should have put up Jeremiah chapter 25. This is when God causes all these nations. And in fact, if you look at Jeremiah 25, when you get to that latter part of the verses there, from verse 15 on down, he's naming all these different countries in the Middle East. He even includes Esau in this group. And how that he causes them to all fight and war against one another. Maybe we should jump over to it. And then there's also another passage, and I think it's in Exodus 32, where God says that Moses would return. He would come to the land and he would do marvels like never seen before. Okay? So as we're seeing these things, and then like I said, if you look at Jeremiah 25, and we get down to say I think it's verse 15 or so, For thus saith the Lord God of Israel unto me, take this cup of wine of fury at my hand, and cause all the nations to whom I send thee to drink it. And they shall drink it in real fro, and be like madmen, and because of the sword that I will send among them. That's interesting. This happens right after the 70 years that Israel was to be inside of Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar's rule. But if you go back and look at what Daniel says, Daniel is looking at the prophecies of Jeremiah, and he's contemplating earnestly about that 70 years. This is when the angel Gabriel comes to him, and he likens those 70 years to 70 weeks that becomes what we call today the 70 weeks of Daniel. And he's contemplating on Jeremiah's prophecies right here. And that's what's the first part of this chapter here about the 70 years that Israel would be in captivity. Or in this case here, not Israel, but the house of Judah. All of Judah would be in captivity as a result of that, right? Now, they're to come back home. But then if we look at this from the aspect of the way Daniel is confronted by Gabriel, he is focused on those 70 years. And then Gabriel says to him, he shows him that it's like those 70 years, he's almost telling him, like, read between the lines, are 70 weeks that will be accomplished upon thy people, thy holy city, and will also bring about the end of transgression, etc. Right? So this is why we see a cyclical event. Now, so in that case here, when we come to this latter part of the chapter 25 in Jeremiah, I don't think it has anything to do with right after the time of the house of Judah coming back to the homeland, but rather it would be at the end of the 70th week there when these nations all go mad against each other. So, because then he says, then I took the cup in the Lord's hand and made all the nations to drink, and to whom all the Lord had sent me, Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, the kings thereof, the princes thereof, to make them an appallment, an astonishment, a hissing, and a curse, as if it is this day. And Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and his servants, his princes, and all his people. And he mingled the people and all the kings of the land of Uz, the kings of the land of Philistines, Ashkelon, Gaza, Ekron, Ramnat, Ashdod, Edom, Moab, children of Ammon, and all the kings of Tyre, and the kings of Zidon, the kings of the isles which is beyond the sea, Dedan, Tema, Buz, and all that they have the corners of their hair polled, and all the kings of Arabia, and all the kings of the mingled people that dwell in the wilderness, and all the kings of Zimri, and all the kings of Elam, and the kings of the Medes, and all the kings of the north and the near, one with another, and all the kingdoms of the world which are upon the face of the earth, and the king of Shishak shall drink after them. This is an entire global war. This is World War III. And he makes all of them drink of it. That may give us a whole new meaning even with Obadiah, although the Pope of Rome starts it off by drinking with he and his men, but then it says, let all the nations drink, and may they drink continually and swallow down. Right? Now, but here's what's fascinating. This is where I really want you to get to see. Now we see all this. You know, you say, yeah, I mean, look at that. You got the Persians, the Iranians, you got the Arabians, you know, Saudi Arabia, you got the Egyptians, yeah, you got Gaza, the Palestinians, you've got the Jordanians, you've got Russia, you got the Turkish in here, you got all the nations of the rest of the earth. There comes America, the Europeans, etc. They're all having to drink this down because God is bringing judgment on the earth, but He's allowing them to do it to each other, right? That's what's happening there. Now, let's go back then, though, to Exodus chapter 2, because I want to point out something about this, and this is what really touched my heart when I looked at this. All right, so if we look at this, and let's say this is just another angle to look at the revelation here. Who made thee a ruler and a judge over us? Thinkest thou to kill me as you did kill the Egyptian? And Moses feared and said, surely the thing is known. Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian and sat down by a well. All right? But notice though, Moses is dealing with another Hebrew. And what's Moses doing? Here's what gets me. It's the second day. Okay? V'yotze b'yom hashnei. All right, it's the second day. First day Moses comes out, he kills the Egyptian, buries him. He's done with it. First time Moses come in his ministry, yeah, he came back with a stick in his hand, and buddy, he took care of the Egyptians. He wiped them all out, delivered the children of Israel, took them to the promised land. But if we look at this as a type, as a parallel, Moses comes back the next time on the second day. Now what is Moses dealing with? Now Moses is dealing with the sins of the Jews and what they're doing to their own people. And they don't like it. Isn't that interesting? Moses comes back and now Moses deals with the Jews beating the Jews. Well, let me tell you something. I want to help the man out so when he gets here, we've already got the job going for him. All right? Because these are the things that we've been doing all along. And not just myself. This is what's been done by other rabbis, and which I'm not a rabbi, but this has been done by rabbis and by other Jews that have been trying to expose the crimes that the elite Jews are doing to their own people. And the thing is Moses tries to do it, and he had to flee for his life. Why? Because that Jew had so much power as a taskmaster that he was able to speak to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh sent his whole fleet of army ready to go kill Moses, who was a prince of Egypt. Think about that for a while. Think about what the Zionist Jews are doing today when they have been the cause of the crimes of the Holocaust itself. They helped perpetrate it. The very Jews that were in power from the beginning, Moshe Sharif, Ben Gurion, all of them, every single one of them, even up to Netanyahu, working with Rome, an elite class that hate the Orthodox Jews. Oh yeah, there's a bunch of rabbis in there too. Started off with secular rabbis that would suck right up with Rome and the New World Order and bring about the state of Israel. All right, let me share with you something. Because believe me, I'm not a self-hating Jew, but I cannot stand that evil group that is trying to be taskmasters over our people. I'm going to give you an example from this book. But by the way, what's really interesting, he goes in here and he actually, this rabbi that wrote this book here, names by name even those Vatican cohorts that were helping to kill all the Jews. I'm going to be sharing this book with you guys more and more and more. Very interesting, some of the things in here. It says here, the Catholic Church, the cruel enemy. Just give you a little idea right here. Rabbi Weissmandel writes in Min Harmaitzar in Nitri, there was an 82-year-old archbishop named Komenadka. When the deportation from Slovakia began in the year 1941, Rabbi Samuel David Unger, the rabbi of Nitra, was entreated to go plead before the archbishop to halt the deportations. The wicked old man said to the rabbi of Nitra, "This is not just deportation. There you won't die from hunger and disease. There you will die by slaughter. From the elderly to the infants, children and women, all in one day. And this is the punishment you deserve for the death of our Savior." That's from one of the archbishops for the Vatican. Oh, and believe me, he lays into Pope Pius XII too. Don't kid yourself. He does. He says right here in one place here, he said, upon Eichmann too, the title of holy, and would set aside a day of honoring St. Adolf on its calendar. When the former Pope Pius XII died, the heads of the World Jewish Congress and representatives of the State of Israel hurried to sing the praises of the sly enemy of the Jewish people, while Reform and conservative rabbis competed in their displays of mourning and portrayed him as a savior of Jews during the Holocaust. What is the historical truth? He says. The Pope did take a few steps to prevent the expulsion of Italian Jews, and so continued the pious Vatican tradition. But as the popes of the past, who were architects of persecution and slaughter of Jews in Catholic Europe throughout the middle Middle Ages, supposedly defended the lives of the Jews of Rome and other Italian cities, demonstrating by public actions Catholic piety. It was not until the year 1945, i.e. until the fall of Germany, that the Pope published his annual pastoral letter, which would have discredited anti-Semitism and supported the saving of Jews from slaughter. Specifically, the Catholic population in all Germany-occupied countries slaughtered Jews without pity. Encouraged by their priests, the Poles, Lithuanians, Austrians, Croatians, Slovaks, and Hungarians were all fanatical Catholics and all unsatiable appetites for Jewish blood. So he just tries to cover it all up. But in the book, believe me, he goes into a lot of sins by Pope Pius XII. Now, here's what I wanted to get into, though, when I'm talking about this issue about Moses, his second coming, would expose the sins of the Jews against the Jews, or the Hebrews against the Hebrews, right? Now, I'm going to give you some excerpts in here. He states in here on page 19, there were Jews who could not resist the test of boot and whiplash, and by turning informer upon their brethren, by rendering them unto the hangman and making them scapegoats of the capos, the Jewish councils gained their own freedom. Since we were not subjected to their trials, thank God, it is questionable if we can judge them in the full severity of the law. Not every generation merits foremen who are willing to sacrifice themselves as did the Jewish foremen in ancient Egypt. But here lies the paradox that the state which designates itself as Israel has on its boots a law demanding justice to be meted out to the Nazis and their collaborators, both for those laden with guilt who stood at the helm of Jewry during the Holocaust. There is no law to call them into account. Not only that, but those who have died in the intervals are lauded and revered, and those who are yet alive maintain their respected positions as they continue to prop themselves up as representatives of the Jewish people. Now he's telling you in here, the very Hebrews, the Jews that were committing the crimes against their own brethren in the Holocaust, become the heads and leaders of the Jewish nation. He will tell you in this book here that Ben Gurion and Moshe Sharit turned the blind eye to the plight of the Jews of Hungary, the Hungarian Jews, at the tune of 800,000 were sent to their deaths. In writing the book, the man is just not telling his own personal experiences. He is citing documented evidence by other Jewish people during this time that have documented the very crimes that were committed against the Jewish people at this time there. I'll read you another little short section here. It says here, from where did the thousands of Jewish police, capos is what they called them, who served the Germans in the concentration camps and ghettos come? From which circles was this infamous army recruited? The survivors from the Holocaust all concur that they originated from the underworld and from the masculine. The very people who denounced their unenlightened brethren for their traditional garb, do not these Miskalim harbor the identical feelings of scorn and even hatred of their masters and officers, the Nazis? Question survivors. Sorry about that, guys. Question survivors of the ghettos and camps. They will certify that the beatings they received at the hands of Jewish golden youth were filled with scorn. They fulfilled their task with zeal and cruelty to greater extent than that required by the German comrades. And it just goes on and on and on and on. And it's just like there's never an end to the pages here of all the crimes that were committed by the Hebrew people, by the Jewish themselves, against their own brethren. And what I find interesting is that if this truly is a parallel, as I believe it is, that the one thing that Moses will do when he returns with Elijah is he is going to call out the sins of the Hebrew people against their own brethren. He will call out what they have done all these years. He will call out the crimes that, even like in the case of today, Netanyahu allowing gay parades to be in the city of Jerusalem, the holiest city on the face of the earth, the great city as the book of Revelation calls it. He will call out how they have made the covenant with Rome once again. He will call out how that Shimon Peres, who was trained in a Jesuit school, ended up selling out the Sephardic Jewish children from the country of Yemen, would send them to be tested by the American scientists that wanted to see, it was a request by the American scientists that if they were going to have a nuclear bomb, that they would have to submit their children to high doses of radiation for experiments. So instead of sending the Ashkenazi children, which I don't think they should have sent anybody for the test, they didn't need the nuclear bombs. If you truly believe that God is with you, you don't need a nuclear bomb. But what did he do? Shimon Peres sent those children to have those experiments done. They became known, as Barry Chamish writes, the ringworm children. All the other crimes against the Sephardic Jews that have perpetrated by Ashkenazim, and how that they also took the Yemenite women's children from them. Thousands of them were taken from them and never given back to the mothers, and then told later, oh, they must have died in the hospital. Oh, sorry, they got sick. All kinds of lies that were perpetrated against them. You don't think that Moses won't call your hand? What did Yeshua say himself? There will be one that will accuse you, even Moses, in whom you claim to be your own prophet. He will accuse you. And I've always noticed that Yeshua brought that out as a future argument there, that he will be the one that accuses you. That's exactly right. And so it is coming. Moses will return with Elijah in this day here, and he will call the crimes of the Jews today and what they have done against their own people. He will also cry out against the crimes that the modern state of Israel today is doing against your Israelite brethren, the other 10 tribes that you're doing in the United States now, as you send over your Gestapo Mossad agents to train the FEMA camps, the people here in America, to be able to do the crimes against the other 10 tribes of Israel, as you separate these true believers here that believe that Yeshua is the Messiah. Yeah, you've been training them as well, and all the other crimes that are being perpetrated in the world today. Even the Palestinians, as Moses said, love your neighbor as yourself, and we find out that they share also a DNA connection to the Jewish people, and yet the crimes that you commit against them as well. He will call out these crimes that are going on. Do you think he will be silent? I don't think he will. But I do know one thing. They will try to have him killed. And as a result, we find out that the 2 witnesses are killed. And how are they going to do it? None other than Pharaoh. Rome will once again put them to death. And their bodies will lay in the street that is spiritually called Sodom and Gomorrah, as a testimony, as they have testified at that time, that Jesus Christ truly was the Mashiach. He was the Messiah. And though they claimed that his body was stolen away by those that believed in him, this time nobody will steal the bodies away. No doubt they will say, let's see if God comes to rescue them. After 3.5 days, though, their life will enter into them, and they will stand upon their feet. Then the world will know that truly Yeshua raised from the dead as well. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching the Nun Institute of Biblical Research. Stand with us, won't you? Would you help support this broadcast? I'll take you to our website just so you can kind of know where our website is, what it looks like. We prefer Israeli News Live because Israeli News Live is pretty much the only website that we actually use. We do have IsraelReturns.com, but IsraeliNewsLive.org. If you just go right there to the website there, that'll bring you to our our main page. Our news is always on here. Occasionally we do write articles in there. We do got a conference coming up in Pensacola, Florida. If you happen to be in the area, we have I think about 10 seats or so left at the conference. If you want to come, it's $20 a seat. We have to charge, unfortunately. We hate doing that, but there's issues at which I think we explained it in the article here. Don't want to waste your time right now with that. And also, we have another conference coming up in Kansas. That is in Shawnee, Kansas, and we already have a website for that. It's called conference.israelynewslive.org. That conference is on December the 2nd, 56 days away. And Dr. Steve Pigeon and my wife will also be speaking at that conference. So it'd be very interesting, no doubt. That one there, you can just register on the website, print your tickets out there. But if you would like to help support this ministry, you can just click on the donate button there on the front of the page there and help support the work we're doing. We certainly do appreciate that. And also, we have our regular address. Whoop, I got a lot of stuff here. Didn't even know I had up here. But also our regular address as well. If you would like to donate online, you can do so. This here is our regular address to Noon Institute, 8297 Championsgate Boulevard, number 442. I'll kind of blow that up for you here on the screen. Championsgate, Florida, 33896. You can send your donation there if you would like to do that to help us in the broadcasts that we do here. Again, 8297 Championsgate Boulevard, number 442, Championsgate, Florida, 33896. God bless you. Thank you for watching. Leave us a comment. Tell us how you felt about this. We hope it's a blessing to you. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun with Israeli News Live and Noon Institute. Shalom, shalom.